Hello and welcome to the alternative channel, my alternative channel, Anti-War. It's the name of the channel, Anti-War. So I'm drinking Founders Dirty Bastardo Scotch style ale. They haven't changed the label in a long time. It's kind of like a strange painting of this guy. I don't quite understand the label except for the plaid, but anyway, that being said, it is an 8.5% alcohol and it's a 50 IBU beer. So high bitterness, relatively high bitterness and strong alcohol. Bottled January 5th, 2021. Dark ruby in color, brewed with 7 varieties of imported malts. Very nice. Complex in finish with a hints of smoke and peat. All right. Got this 6-pack for $8.99 at Mathern's. I'm getting so tired of these sky high craft beer prices. This is a decently good price. You know, $8.99. That's a good price. I'm seeing so many of them are $10.99, $14.99, a 4-pack. I don't see a whole lot of value, and then half the time they're not that good. So you really feel like you got ripped off. Nice little smoke there coming out the bottle. Water vapor. A thick ivory head and a dark copper appearance, translucent copper appearance. Maybe it's not that dark. Pretty dark beer. Rich malts, like they say, a hint of smoke. I'll say a hint of caramel candy, like Hershey's caramel candies, just chewy caramels. Rich flavor, very malty, very sweet, bready, dark bread crust, brown bread crust, sugary sweet. There's bitterness, but you don't pick up that it's that bitter by tasting it. To me, it has chocolate notes. Don't know why, but it does. Nice smoke, peatiness. Like you get with a Scotch whiskey. Some Scotch whiskeys, a lot of them don't have any peaty taste. Talking about the Vietnam War, 50 years ago, 1971. That's probably around the time where I remember seeing it on television as a 2 or 3 year old. I mean, I don't remember it as far as like, sitting there thinking, oh yeah, this is the Vietnam War. I'm really concerned about it. But just seeing it, they would show like film, usually, well, back then we had a black and white television, so I remember seeing color clips later, but when I was maybe 5, but just something you didn't pay much, I didn't pay any mind to, just seeing it on TV, like you just observing it, but not having any kind of impression of it either way. So later on, I got interested in history and got a bachelor's degree in social studies education and a master's degree in history. So I did it over 20 years teaching. Hello, Ron. I just got home from work. I can't listen now, but will later. Great beer, by the way, says Craig Swenson. Oh, hello to you. And you're right. It is a great beer. I can't gulp it too fast, though. And that bitterness is starting to kick in. Ooh, better than I had thought. All right. So in 1971, so we look at the Vietnam War. Now you say, well, your channel is called Anti-War. Why are you talking about the Vietnam War? Do you support the war? Doesn't make sense. Your channel makes no sense. I didn't say I supported the U.S. involvement in the war. I did not say I supported the U.S. involvement in the overall bigger war, which was the Cold War that started in 1944 and is still going on today and getting worse thanks to the current Biden administration. But back in the early 90s, there was a chance that they could have ended the Cold War, but the U.S. seemed reluctant to do that, although Russia and China seem interested in doing that, ending the Cold War. All right, so first, a little background. We know that Germany was clearly defeated by 1944. So, I mean, that was just, pretty obvious. They're going down. So the allies, the Western allies, Great Britain and the United States and other countries, and the Eastern associate, the Soviet Union, had nothing in common aside from the fact they wanted to defeat Germany, but they didn't like each other, really. And they had been targeting the Soviet Union well, there's the mail. Really, since 1815, as Imperial Russia, the British didn't really like them, so they transferred that targeting to the Soviet Union. Not to excuse the Soviet Union, because they certainly supported revolutionary, left-wing revolutionary, socialist revolutionary activity in the Western countries like Germany, France, the United States, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Italy, and so on. Spain, of course, for sure, sponsoring the communist government in Spain in the 1930s. But so there was a long feud between the United States, Great Britain, and other Western countries and the Soviet Union. China, or I should say mainland China, became communist in 1949. They didn't vote to become communist. They were taken over by communist rebels led by Mao Zedong. But Mao Zedong and the rebels were unable to capture offshore islands of China, the big island of Taiwan, about the size of Louisiana, Quemoy, Matsu, and the Pescador Islands. And they haven't been able to capture those islands yet, up even now 2021. So really, China today, you have the Republic of China, the government that was established by revolution in 1912, and their headquarters today is in Taipei, on Taiwan Island, which most people call Taiwan, the country Taiwan. But really, it's just an island, Taiwan Island, or formerly known as Formosa Island, and the mainland is held by the rebels, which they call their occupied area, the People's Republic of China. And of course, they were allied with the Soviet Union, at least until 1960, when they started having ideological problems. And plus, they had national problems like that were not related to communism, just border issues and a long ongoing conflict between Russia, the Russian nation, and the Chinese nation. You say, well, it was racial hatred or ethnic hatred or whatever that communism could not overcome. They're all supposed to be socialist countries and not care about race and ethnicity, but that usually isn't the case. So they had a split in 1960, really before 60, but it came to a head in 1960. So you got two parts to the communist world after that. The Soviet Union-led Orthodox communist world, and the Maoist Chinese communist world. And they had followers like Tanzania, Albania for a good while, and so on. Now, Vietnam had their own Soviet-supported rebels led by Ho Chi Minh. Ho wanted to set up a communist government, kick the French out, which most Vietnamese would be glad the French were gone. They wanted to have their own country because France had set up an empire in Vietnam under Napoleon III, the French emperor in the 1860s, and they kept it even after Napoleon was overthrown in 1870. But so after World War II, France was looking to get out of Asia and give up their colonies, slowly though, but give them up eventually. The British also were trying to do that because it turned out it was costing like $10 to make every dollar in a colony. It really wasn't. It helped some special interest groups, certain industrialists and whatever, but it didn't really, it was like a burden on the country. And so They just say, well, we're going to get rid of these places. And the British started dismantling their empire, and they finally got it dismantled in 1997 when they gave Hong Kong back to China, the Hong Kong territory. Now, they still have overseas territories, of course, today, but those are areas that want to remain British. They just say we would rather stay British. France, maybe those territories do, or maybe they don't today, like New Caledonia out in the Pacific, huge island in the Pacific. And France still owns a mainland territory in South America, French Guiana. They weren't as keen on getting rid of all of their empire as the British were. So they still have a presence. Islands in the Indian Ocean, islands in the Caribbean, in the Pacific Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, Corsica, and South America. And they still have a big influence in Africa. They don't necessarily rule Mali or Niger, and our Côte d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast, but they sort of have a backhand influence over those countries. A lot of thousands of French troops roaming around down there, and people that cross or get into conflicts with France, their government, you tend to notice that they don't last too long. All of a sudden, they get overthrown by some rebels that show up out of nowhere. Or the French army might just go in and overthrow them, like that guy Gbagbo. And what was it, the Ivory Coast? Or was it Burkina Faso? Gbagbo. I can't keep up because there's so many of these little conflicts, and they're all so repetitive. They're like identical one to the other. But anyway, that's only tangentially related to the other Vietnam War. So the Vietnam War comment. Hey, first time I've seen this channel live, says Dark Lotus. Yeah, I don't do too much on this channel, but I usually don't have time. Like, I don't feel like doing it. I'm doing stuff. I'm busy. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to make a video. But today I have a little time, so I got tired of listening to beer reviews, which I am going to keep listening to those and watching them, and doing other things. But I said, I'll do this video because it was the 50th anniversary of Lam Son, Operation Lam Son 719. So let's go to the Vietnam War. So here's France. They had taken over French Indochina in the 1860s. Vietnam, which was not really a single country back then. It was Tonkin at the top, Annam in the middle, and Cochin China in the bottom. Cochin China, there was a lot of Chinese people lived down there. Like lived down in Vietnam, but they were ethnically Chinese, like millions. Same thing with Singapore. Singapore is a Chinese country, but it's not ruled by China. And then they had Cambodia, which we pronounce Cambodia. Because that's what it looks like. It spells Cambodia. The French say Cambodia, but it's Cambodia, as they say in their language, Cambodia. And Laos. They call it Laos. We call it Laos. All right. It was pretty peaceful, really, until World War II. So France had a pretty strong grip on the area. They were pretty mild with the people, and everything was getting developed and modernized. There wasn't like a huge Vietnamese uproar to get rid of France, honestly. But Japan took it over during World War II, and that's a complicated story, which I'm not going to go into. But they did take it over and started to dominate it. And the Vietnamese definitely did not want the Japanese there. The French, they could tolerate. The Japanese, they could not tolerate. They didn't want Japanese or the Chinese in their country. All right, so, but there was this, like, you call him a troublemaker. He's this freedom fighter, Ho Chi Minh. I want to free my people from France, and of course, be the dictator after I do that. But like all these freedom fighters, they always got like an ulterior motive: free my country and then rule it with a much firmer and more totalitarian grip than the people that were there before. Um, so he goes to the French, making all kind of demands. I want my country to let go. They say, well, we're going to let the country go free anyway. What are you talking about? Oh, they checked his background out. They said, oh yeah, we know about you. You that communist. We're not going to let it become a communist country. We got a lot of business interests over there, plantations where we grow bananas and all kind of stuff, and you're not taking it over. So the what? The Soviets can get all the money from it and dominate it with their little partners in China, Mao's people? Oh, I don't think so. Well, as communists do, when they don't get their way, they start using terrorism, So they start bombing, setting off bombs, shooting people, assassinating officials, and causing mayhem. And so France sends troops in there after World War II, start looking for them. Of course, Vietnam was mostly a wooded country, like rural. There's some cities, Hanoi, Hue, of course, Saigon and all, but Da Nang, and but they weren't in the cities. They're hiding out in the woods and then setting off bombs in the cities. Imperial Europe get accused correctly for carving up lines that were not previously actual countries. Nobody admits communist blocs doing the same. Right? They all do the same. But Tonkin, Annam, and Cochin China was pretty much like generally Vietnamese people speaking. Vietnam means land of Viets. Nam is their word, their language for country. Viet country, Nam, Vietnam. Country of Viets. Just like they would call the United States America Nam, China Nam. You understand? Like China's, in their language, Chinhua, Zhongguo, or it would depend on the dialect, means Gua means country. Chen, Zhong, well, it depends on the dialect. Like Chinhua is Chinese country. Zhongguo is Chinese country, but in a more harsh way of saying it. But Gua, country. But anyway, so and like the Germans say, like Frankland, land of French, England, land of English, Deutschland, land of Germans. But anyway, but they didn't have too much success. 1945 to 49, it was just troublemakers killing a lot of people, innocent people usually. And then when most of China fell to the communists, but like I said, now for Taiwan and the other islands, now China starts sending massive support to Mao and the Soviet Union through China. So France started having a lot of trouble. So France was weak after World War II anyway. So this went on, and after almost 10 years of fighting, they said, oh, we giving this place up. We out of here. We getting out. And so the United States says, oh no, we have to continue fighting the Cold War because of the domino effect, which President Eisenhower described as, if you let one domino fall, they'll all fall. But he didn't really develop that concept. They always say Eisenhower's domino theory, but it really wasn't his theory. It was developed by the U.S. State Department way back in World War II, really applying it to Germany. Like, if you let one country fall, they'll all fall. So they wanted to have this containment policy, started under Truman and then Eisenhower. We have to contain communism. Don't let it spread any further. We didn't keep it in Russia, and then it spread to Eastern Europe, and then it spread to Africa, and now it's spreading to Asia. And it was that whole propaganda again, to get the Americans incited, saying, oh, they'll be here next, which is a joke. But just like with Germany, they'll be here next. Sure. But anyway, but Americans fall for all this propaganda. Look at the current thing with the illness. Oh, we're all going to die. So we'll have to wear a mask because we're all going to die. So it's very, I guess, easy, more or less, to fool the American people. So they are gung-ho for this. Korea, we got to fight these communists in Korea so we don't have to fight them in the streets of Los Angeles. And so 53,000 Americans get killed in Korea. Doesn't accomplish much. We kept South Korea free so that, what? So, okay, like that's our problem, you know. But anyway, that's the United States. I've said this in previous videos. They picked their wars, and they, when I say, you say, you mean we? No, I say they. I don't do it. They, them in Washington. I don't include me in that. So they look for people to fight. So Eisenhower says, oh yeah, don't give up, don't give up. So the French say, well, hell, you send your troops over here and help us. Eisenhower said, we already sending all kind of money, and y'all wasting it or not doing well with it. So we just got out of the Korean War in 1953. The Americans are not going to go for this, getting involved in Vietnam in 1954. They said, well, we're getting out then. So, of course, France got out, and they had this Geneva, Switzerland ceasefire, and they cut the country in half and let the communists keep the North. You haven't watched the Black Bloc elements in protest, never heard of Antifa, think we failed containment. Yeah. Well, that was the argument of a lot of right-wing groups in the 50s. They're like, why are we fighting communists in Korea and Vietnam? We got them here. You know, they're here. They're here. They're in the universities. They're in the television networks. They're in the movie industry. They're here, not there. We don't have to worry about communists running around in Vietnam. We need to worry about the ones here in the government, working in the defense industry, working in the Department of Defense, working in the universities, corrupting the youth, in the comic book industry, in the teen magazine industry. The ones here. And then, of course, you know, the moderate and left wing say, oh, you're just dreaming. That's all fake. You know, we got to go to, of course, the left, not the hard left, like Socialist Workers Party or anything like that. But, you know, like the Kennedys and the Hubert Humphreys and all of those liberals, I'm talking about the FDR liberals, Franklin Roosevelt, New Deal liberals, including Ronald Reagan, who was a FDR liberal, Richard Nixon, a New Deal liberal. And we got to go fight him over there. You know, the whole Winston Churchill type mentality. So we know the United States slowly got involved in Vietnam, and by 1965, they're propping up this like extremely corrupt, incompetent government. Talking about putting your money on a bad horse is like the most glaring example of putting your money on a bad horse. So the Soviet Union naturally starts sending more money to North Vietnam. United States sending money to South Vietnam. China sending ground troops, mainly not really to fight in Vietnam, but some of them probably were, but to do like a support activity so that the Vietnamese can go fight in South Vietnam because they're trying to invade South Vietnam and take it over. So North Vietnam was trying to take over South Vietnam using these so-called rebels, the Viet Cong, National Liberation Front, which mostly is just North Vietnamese pretending they're from the South. But whatever the case, I think Kennedy was afraid of communist subversion. Listen to his speech about secret societies. Yeah, I listened to that speech. He doesn't really talk about secret societies in that speech. It's just like a lead into the speech. But, you know, people want to say, oh, yeah, well, that's why he was killed and all that. But you know, I know he seemed to be pretty gung-ho for Vietnam and Cuban Missile Crisis and all that stuff. He was one of those Cold War type engagement people. You know, I call them the troublemakers. You know, so with Eisenhower, the U.S. starts getting involved. I think the first American killed in Vietnam was 1959, and they kept denying it's not a war. We're not in. But they were, you know, doing all kind of subversive activity. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Covert activity. Not subversive, covert. coming up with all kind of excuses. Oh, he got killed flying a crop duster, or he got killed doing some kind of foreign aid work. But it was like, fighting. But and then under Kennedy, you have a couple of it's a couple of hundred troops over there doing advisory stuff, helping them, and then it's a couple of thousand, and then it's 3,000, and then a bunch of them start getting killed under Kennedy's administration. So by the time Kennedy was assassinated, you had a good amount of Americans already getting killed over there, and they keep denying it. Oh no, it's not a war. Oh, but by the time he died or was killed, they had over 10,000 American troops there. So clearly they're involved. And then you got Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, an old New Deal hack. He's in there, and he's got all these advisors, so that this keeps building up. Well, we know what happened, so let's go up to 1971. It went on for about 3 years, like the heavy fighting, 65 to 68. They training South Vietnam, giving them all these new weapons, state-of-the-art weapons and all this equipment, and say, oh, look, you go fight those communists now. Never seeming to be able to motivate them too much. They didn't seem motivated. It's like you could bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? So they just seem like, don't you want to defend your country? And their attitude was like, well, maybe. So the United States became very discouraged, losing thousands, tens of thousands of troops. Yeah, defeating the communists every battle, of course. The Soviets were losing a bunch of money in that war. Communist China was a broke country anyway, and backwards and had no technology, and all ruined by Mao's incompetent insanity. So they couldn't really afford to keep doing it. The United States was losing all kind of money on this war, and of course some special interests made money. But anyway, so this helped Nixon get elected president in 1968 over Humphrey, barely beating Humphrey, but him and Humphrey had pretty much the same policy, which was let's get out of this war, but not just leave them hanging. Not just cut and run. Let's slowly pull out and try some kind of way to train these obviously unmotivated people to defend their own country. And it makes us look bad, And if we look bad, then the whole Cold War goes bad because the Allies don't trust us. They'll think we're going to sell them out. That's the whole point of it. He would get labeled a John Birch guy now. Kennedy? John Birch Society guy? I'm not too sure about that. Okay, and by the way, the John Birch Society was always opposed to being involved in the Vietnam War. If you read their literature, they were saying this war is a racket. And they were like fanatically anti-communist, but they never wanted to be in the Vietnam War. If you look at they opposed it, and they opposed being in World War II. What do you expect? I mean, they weren't around when World War II was around, but their people were, and they were from that old right. The old right, the paleo conservatives who didn't want to be in World War I, who didn't want to be in World War II, who didn't want to be in the Korean War, who didn't want to be in the Vietnam War, who were anti-war. All right. In fact. So, very caramel. Oh, yummy. Now, so Nixon comes in there, say, let's get out, but not just pull out. Let's slowly get out. But we got to do what he called Vietnamization, right? Vietnamization. We're going to train these people, give them the best weapons in the world, but we're going to leave. Now in South Korea, the United States did the same thing. Train these people, give them the best weapons in the world. But of course, the United States kept 30,000 troops in South Korea to protect them from invasion from the north. The United States still has tens of thousands of troops in South Korea and still threatens to bomb North Korea or fight them if they attack South Korea. So it discourages North Korea from trying to take them over. South Vietnam was a different problem because the Congress was saying, meaning the liberal Democrats, who, and a lot of Republicans too, but they were getting tired of the war. Say, oh, we're going to cut you off. We're going to cut all funding. They're telling Nixon that. We're going to cut all funding for the war pretty soon. So he doesn't have much choice but to get out. So he wanted to get out anyway. He wanted to end the Cold War, if you read about him. He wanted to get rid of all nuclear weapons eventually. End the Cold War by 1977, at the end of his second term. That's why he was doing visits to China. He didn't go to Mao and say, "You're a killer." He knew he was a killer. Everybody knew he was a killer. He didn't go to Mao and say, "You're a killer." End the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Just get out. So Nixon tells South Vietnam, look, we're getting out. They didn't believe it. They never seemed to believe it. Like, no, you're not going to leave. No, we're going to leave. You know how France left? We're leaving. But we're going to train you, give you all these great weapons, and then you got to fight. You got to fight. So in 1969, they start pulling out the troops. Now, in 1970, they noticed a curious buildup along the Cambodian border, right? And so Nixon was saying, oh, no, we're not going to pull out, and then you're going to attack through Cambodia and take over Saigon. If you look at a map, like this map, Cambodia is right by Saigon, you see. There's no screen share on these Google Hangouts, unfortunately. But you see, there's Saigon right there where my finger is, and there's Cambodia right there. I mean, that's not far. Come right across. Of course, it's through thick jungle, you know, and not too many good highways. Let me go get some water. Be right back. So, you know, in 1970, the United States and South Vietnam launched that kind of semi-surprise attack on the Cambodian border to root out the North Vietnamese. It was pretty successful, but it was more like a rear guard action. I've described it in the past, a rear guard action. I mean, they're leaving. It's not like, oh, the great victory, we winning. It's like, no, we're covering your rear as we leave. Kind of take pressure off of the Republic of Vietnam, South Vietnam. Now, in 1970, they launched it. Now we go to 1971. So, okay, the Cambodian adventure, Cambodian incursion, you would more accurately call it April, May, June 1970, was successful. The South Vietnamese were very confident. But remember, the United States did most of the ground fighting and all the air support. So they're saying, now look, there's a lot of pressure building up along in South Laos, along the middle part of Vietnam, South Vietnam, northern South Vietnam, along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And we want to conduct this big raid, extensive month-long raid, and just totally disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail there. And of course, we know now that a lot of the supplies were coming in through Sihanoukville. Maybe most of the supplies were coming in through Sihanoukville, which was here. Get this map straight. Here in Cambodia, and then going to the rebels and stockpiling communist troops along the border, Sihanoukville. So the Ho Chi Minh Trail may have been a feint all along. You know what I'm saying? Like, make it look like most of the supplies are coming through there. Then they spend all this time bombing the trail, bombing the trail, bombing the trail. It's like, where are all these supplies coming from? But they're coming in through Sihanoukville, Cambodia, a so-called neutral country. It wasn't really neutral because Prince Sihanouk, King Sihanouk, Norodom Sihanouk, he didn't really want to be involved in the war, but he wanted to stay on the throne. So he was like, well, I think North Vietnam's got the advantage. So he was always chummy with North Vietnam and China because he figured they're going to be the new players, new kid on the block, more or less. So he was basically letting them use his country as a supply route. You can come through, doesn't matter to me. And probably he was getting paid, you know, but he got overthrown because of that in 1970, because a lot of the military leaders of Cambodia, you know, they say, you're not really defending your country. You're just letting these communists run you roughshod and using your country as a conduit to take over Vietnam. But he was sort of a bumbling leader. He seemed sort of detached from reality in many ways, more interested in his record career, like literally making record albums, pop music record albums. So he's a very strange person. And he died a few years ago, not long ago. Now his son is the king, who doesn't do much, but stay on the throne. They got prime ministers who like dictators. But anyway, so they telling South Vietnam and their president Thieu, who was one of these people that like to brag a lot. You know, he's like a big tough guy strutting around. I was a general in the Vietnam Army. You know, I'm a big shot. But you're really nothing. You know. But he was like full of bravado. You know, always talking big. If he was around today, yeah, I don't know. So, but the United States was kind of very unconvinced about Thieu and his second in command, Key. But Thieu especially seemed much more incompetent. Not to say that Key was like exactly the best, but it was sort of like, do you know what you're involved in here? I mean, do you understand what's happening? And he said, oh, you're going to support us. You're going to support us all the time. And they're like, no, we're leaving. Don't you understand? So they told them very clearly, you've got to get ready because you're going to have this big raid on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And we're going to fly you in. The United States Army cannot come in like on the ground in 1970. It's air support only. You got to do the fighting. After all, you know, hell, it's your country. You have to do the fighting. You got the best equipment in the world. You're better trained than the North Vietnamese army. They using Soviet equipment is always inferior, or usually inferior. Now's your time to shine. You know, so you got to prove yourself. Oh, okay, yeah. So they sent them in, you know, they sent them in to the battlefield to fight the NVA, and they did terrible, really. So this is what's happening in 1971. They're not doing well at all. Now, General Abrams, Crichton Abrams, he was the new commander-in-chief over there since 1969, 68, 69. I don't know officially when, but since 68, 69, when they got rid of Westmoreland. He didn't want to admit that they were doing terrible. You know, it's really no reflection on him. Your ally is terrible, you know, so he's sending back these reports. Oh, yeah, it's going all right. It's going fairly well. But Kissinger and Nixon were being told by other intelligence apparatuses. They were saying it ain't going well, it's going terrible, actually. And so that's when Nixon decided, we got to get rid of this guy, you know. He's lying to me, really. And they say, no, it looks bad. They did keep Abrams around until 72, but they got rid of him in 72. Maybe we'll make a video about that later. But after a month of this, and they were getting really torn up, so they basically evacuated all the South Vietnamese troops from central Laos, South Central. Well, you know, Laos is skinny, so we're talking about the more southern part of Laos. And of course, Thieu and all of them announced on TV and the radio, oh, it was a great victory. In fact, the greatest victory in the history of our Vietnamese army, you know, and all this stuff. And the North Vietnamese were laughing like, ha ha, yeah, sure, great. The traffic on the Ho Chi Minh Trail actually increased after the battle, the raid, the operation. So Nixon and Kissinger and all of them back in the United States are looking at this, shaking their head like, what's wrong with these people? You know, their army is horrible. Their performance level is horrendous. They don't fight. They have no motivation. They are not motivated. The main thing they're good at doing is dropping their weapons and running. How can these people survive, you know? It was like Italy in World War II. Great airplanes, like the most sophisticated aircraft in the world. Maybach was great Italian engine companies, you know, great Italian tanks, technically great, a big, powerful Navy. So, you know, if you looked at Italy's military on paper, it was like, oh, this country could really fight. There was only one little problem. They lacked one important element: motivation. They had Mussolini, the prime minister, egging them on, you know, oh, yeah, we're going to fight. But they were terrible. The only thing the Italians were good at doing was dropping their weapons and running. So what good is it to have all this fantastic equipment and great airplanes and wonderful tanks and a powerful Navy if you don't have the will to fight? It is no good. It does you nothing. So the Americans were generally motivated to fight. The Australians, the New Zealanders, the Filipinos, the South Koreans, even the Republic of China sent troops in undercover in Vietnam. The Thai Army, Royal Thai Army, they're all motivated. But the South Vietnamese, who they're trying to defend, they seem like they don't want to fight. So this really accelerates the U.S. desire to get out of this war. Nixon was privately saying, we got to get out of here. These people are terrible. They're horrible. You know, they're just going to collapse. And then it's going to make us look bad, like we lost the war. And that's what a lot of people say today. The United States lost the Vietnam War. You know, usually left-wing pro-communist people. Well, I mean, you would have to have a child's mentality to actually believe that. Well, they don't really believe that. The ones that say that, they don't believe it. They know better. They just say it because they know most Americans are ignorant and don't know history. So they'll believe it. You know, they'll believe it. But it isn't true. And once again, mind you, please keep in mind, I do not support the United States involvement in the war or even the Cold War. I don't want people to misconstrue that. The channel is called Anti-War after all. So 1971 was really a bad harbinger. You know, it was a bad sign. On public relations, what was the U.S. government telling the people? Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. It's looking very well. It's looking very good. The South Vietnamese are doing very well. The operation was, oh, yeah, it was very successful. But there were reports coming back even then on the news saying successful. You know, what is all this? This is it's terrible. And Nixon said, all y'all doing is being negative, telling CBS News. Y'all just being negative. You're pointing out, you showing one video of the South Vietnamese running away, but you don't show all the other videos where they're fighting hard, you know. But he knew better, fighting hard. So really, they were so discouraged. But they weren't going to change. The U.S. is telling them, we're leaving. We are definitely, every month they're pulling more and more troops out, steadily pulling them out. It's like the Afghanistan thing today. Afghanistan. Trump said, look, we're getting out. Y'all got to fight. Well, of course, their performance was terrible. The Afghanistan government is obviously incapable of holding on to power without the U.S. backing them up. The vast majority of the people are either indifferent to the government or hostile to it. And it's pretty obvious that once the U.S. pulls out, that government's going to fall to the rebels, just like it fell to the rebels in 1992 when the Soviet Union pulled out. So the U.S. knows they ain't going to hold on. But Trump was not going to, he was like Nixon. We're not going to back down. We're getting out. We're getting out. I don't care what happens. And that was Nixon's attitude. We're getting out. Now, his only concern was how is it going to look in the greater context of the Cold War. See, he was concerned about that. He didn't think he could negotiate so well with the Soviet Union in ending the Cold War if the U.S. displayed weakness, you know, got to, in his opinion, negotiate from a position of strength. In 1971, the Soviet Union was very interested in negotiating an end to all of this because the Vietnam War hurt the United States' economy very badly. It was really devastating to the Soviet economy, and we know that because they collapsed in 1990, only 15 years after the war ended. I mean, it hurt us and it destroyed them. bankrupt them, kind of like France in the Revolutionary War. Did the Revolutionary War hurt the British economy? Yeah, sure. Did it hurt their prestige? Of course. What did it do to France? Destroyed France, bankrupt the country. But, you know, it took 17 years for that to come to fruition. Now, you say, yeah, but it's more than just that. They had a lot of incompetence in the French government, like total money mismanagement, like the Soviet Union. Yeah, that's true. That's true, of course. But it helped accelerate it, you see. It took a bad situation, made it untenable. It was like the Titanic, you know, it once it busts up in those 5 watertight compartments, that's it. You're going down. So 1971, the U.S. could probably see, or at least pretty reasonably predict, that the future of South Vietnam was not very promising. But of course, the U.S. government wasn't going to say that publicly. Nixon just say, "Oh yes, we're very confident for the future of the Republic of Vietnam." But steadily pulling out. Australia getting all their troops out. New Zealand getting out. Everybody getting out. But the government of South Vietnam keeps charging ahead, you know, seeming blind to the situation, like literally blind to the situation, and not really showing much concern. Just the U.S. is advising them, saying, what? You have to fight, or you have no hope. Oh, but you're going to be here with planes. You're going to bomb them. They said, but it's not going to last forever. You know, you don't understand. It's not going to last, but they don't seem to understand. So we're going to go one day, maybe in a year, we'll look at 1972. A much more disastrous situation in turn of events. As bad as South Vietnam did in 1971. Now, I mean, there were some instances where they fought well, of course, but the overall performance was horrible. 1972 is going to be more of the same and worse. More of the same and worse. So for real, then, is when Nixon said, we are getting out of here. This is a joke. But that was the plan since 1969, of course, to get out. But they just accelerated. We're going to get out. We're going to get out. I don't care what kind of deal we make. The deal is terrible. It's a terrible ceasefire agreement. We'll be getting out. And that is the case in 72. But we in 71 right now, 50th anniversary of that. Oh, yes, very bad. I know some people that were there that year. And they say it was hectic, you know. I mean, they were helicopter pilots, so they were saying, oh, yeah, it was bad, you know. But they're still alive, both of them. But anyway, so that pretty much wraps it up. The beer is great. Great value, $8.99 for a 6-pack. Can't go wrong, can't go wrong, can't go wrong. $1.50 a bottle. Yeah, that's a good deal for craft beer these days with these outrageous prices, and usually does never justifies the price. Never justifies the price. The Vietnam War was a bad rap all along. It was a bad situation. I was a little kid, so like literally like a baby, really. But I was 7 years old when the whole thing went kaplooey. But should have never been involved, no kind of way. I would debate anybody on that anytime. Well, I mean, within reason, of course. But yeah, I would debate anybody. If anybody could come to me and say, I can show you why the U.S. should have been involved, I would say, bring it on now. But beware, you're going to lose the debate. You will lose. You will lose. Same thing for any war, Korea, World War II, the First World War, the war against the South in 1861. Bring it on. Anytime you want to debate, be my guest, but you're not coming on here with an alias covering your face. You're going to use your real name and your real face. But you come on, I'll give you 30 minutes uninterrupted. We'll go to the main channel if you want. 30 minutes uninterrupted. You tell me why, and I'm going to show you how we shouldn't have been. But I'm telling you ahead of time, so don't get angry later. Don't get angry later when I'm telling you ahead of time, you're going to lose. That's a guarantee that will happen. I'm that confident. I've said that on the main channel. People will say, oh, I don't like your ideas about politics and government. I say, okay, well, you don't like the anti-war position? Fine. You don't like free enterprise? Okay. Come on here and debate me. Oh, no, I can't do that. Oh, yeah, I know you can't do that because you're going to lose. I'll just go sneak off somewhere and talk about you behind your back and say nasty things. Well, go ahead and do it. I mean, in the anti-war movement, we're not worried about that. We know that's going to happen anyway. We're not under any illusions of being popular. We know it's not a popular position. The anti-war position is probably the most unpopular position you can take. You'll get enemies left wing, right wing, middle wing. You know what I mean? We're not here to be popular. We're here to promote the correct ideology. Really, you say you're just promoting propaganda. Well, of course, we're promoting propaganda. Any ideology is going to promote their thinking. They're going to try to say, well, here's what I believe, and let me try to convince you. That's what propaganda is. Our television commercial is propaganda. You try to propagate your ideas. Now, it could be false or it could be ridiculous, it could be wrong. But in my case, and it's not just me, but in the case of the anti-war movement, it's neither false nor wrong. It's right. And it's a powerful argument, so the people don't want to engage it, so they either ridicule it or they run from it. Same thing with free enterprise. They can't challenge it, not really realistically or successfully, so they just say nasty things about it, make up, do ad hominem attacks or whatever, cancel culture and all that. Okay, we understand how that works. We know the game board. We know how the game board is set up. We know who the actors of the game board are. We know how they operate. We are not under any illusions. We are not under any delusions. So anyway, thank you for watching this video about, well, the beer was incidental to it, but it was a very interesting beer, and about the Vietnam War as it stood in 1971. Very precarious for South Vietnam. Very precarious. But anyway, North Vietnam, North Vietnam was very confident at the end of 1971. Their leadership was thinking, oh yeah, it looks like we're going to win. But it just takes some time. They had the tendency to be impatient, like in 1968, when they almost blew the whole thing, almost blew the whole operation. But as it turns out, it was successful. Anyway, but all right, thanks for watching this video production.